Are we sure you're up to alive now?
I don't think it'll hurt. Zach, can you take over?
Funny, I saw you come in and offer up
He can.
really good, yeah. That's excellent. No, you are. Yeah, that every once in a while I do read your thing. So Santa Claus. Yes.
Let's check with Zach.
Hey, Steve, can you hear me?
Zach, I'm gonna go away. Did you have the presentation?
No. Why can't you hear? Stop it, audio.
I wonder if he can see it. We can see it.
So you were the one about. Yeah, I think so.
We have to put the presentation.
I can hear you, comma, but you haven't started the screen share, period.
I did that. I've been driving back and forth. Several times where, you know, Indiana and Walkers and it's got me. Well, I take 60 and 40.
You got it.
Sometimes if I was gonna stay with my sister, then I would take 70. But, there's more Saturday, yeah. But it's nice and flat.
Okay.
Search contacts.
Steve,
Yes, sir.
Zach just called. He said the audio is good, but the screen share is not working.
Okay, I'm gonna call back.
Got it.
Mr. Schaefer. Hey, oh. Good to see you. Get my,
That's not the same.
I haven't got this recently. But here, send me your.
Oh, no, she works for, well, I used to be.
Is this good?
Internet.
Well, I don't know.
Call Zach.
Let's see, we can.
Pure internet.
It was called Heaven and Earth. You know, I'm not on.
Hey, Zach, so you got a picture?
Okay, thanks.
Now, when I do that, did it advance for you
She works with spreadsheets and Oracle.
just now? Did it advance?
Technology.
Yes. So what I think's happening is it told me to upload the presentation. What you see.
It definitely is.
So where do I share my screen?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay.
Might just say, okay.
Asking for trouble, aren't you?
Yeah, she knows so much.
Good change.
Particularly since she changed all their software. Yeah, so we'll see.
I don't know, you guys tell me if you can
PowerPoint.
see things I don't have any videos.
And here we go. We're good.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
So.
Okay. Turn it over to Marv. Bye. There you go, Marv.
We ready to go? All right. Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you, sir. Thank you all for coming. And those of you who are streaming, welcome. Oh, there I'm going Steve, I'm going, okay, wait a minute, where's the camera? Well, I'm getting old. So a few things to tell you about before well, I guess I should turn my phone off, huh? A few things we want to tell you about before we get going here with Scott's presentation. First of all, Zoo, we will be starting to advertise our April Zoo Day shortly, right, Scott? Come on up so people can hear you.
I was going to introduce it at the beginning. All right, that's fine. I'll do it again.
Okay.
So yeah, so we've got our Zoo Day coming up here the end of April. I think that's the 27th and 28th of April. It's a Monday and a Tuesday. So we're going to have that, and there's a sign up for it. You can go to our website. But again, I'll be putting that sign up link on there come the end of the month. But I did just send out something as well, asking groups to kind of respond as well from that standpoint and let me know ahead of time so I can kind of save some space for them.
Okay, before you sit down, homeschool conference.
The homeschool conference, yes. So there's the Greater Homeschool Conference that we're going to be, that's coming up here in March 26th, 27th, 28th. And so we've got a booth there, and we're going to be there handing out resources. And I'm actually going to be speaking on creation and teaching creation from a standpoint of that as a foundation for your homeschooling. So that's the other thing we're doing, right?
Okay. Thank you, Scott. Since our last meeting, we have taught at a homeschool in Shiloh, Illinois. We've been to Clarksville, Missouri. And on Sunday, we'll be speaking in Jefferson City at St. John's Lutheran Church. We will be doing the Sunday school class, adults and kids. And then after the service, they're having a potluck lunch, and they're going to give us 20 minutes to tell everybody about our organization and what we do. So we're looking forward to that. Next month's presentation will be by Gary Winkler. Okay, there he is, all the way in the back. And Gary is going to be presenting on something called the Walam Olam. You can find that online, WALAMOLUM. And there is an Indian tribe that has a creation account that pretty much mirrors what the Bible says, and that's what that's all about. And of course, there are scoffers who throw dirt on that, but I'm sure Gary will bring in what the record says and what the scoffers are saying. So at any rate, tonight's presentation is Scott Jarus. He will be talking about hybrid animals. It's called Ligers and Zonkeys and Pizzleys. Oh my. Pizzley sounds like something I would have called my brother when we were growing up. And maybe Zonkey too. I don't know. At any rate, Scott is one of our speakers, and he has been part of our Speakers Bureau since 2009 when we first started it. And he's been our zoo chairman, currently is serving as the treasurer on the board of directors. Please welcome Scott Jarus.
First question. Microphone. His voice isn't coming through over the microphone.
No, that's only picking up for the internet broadcast.
Oh, okay.
There we go. Can you hear me fine though, Beverly?
But that was good people. That's why. But I knew your voice wasn't going into that.
Trust me. Trust me. They're picking it up on that side. This is my clicker here, Mr. Steve.
Yes, sir.
And to the right is forward.
Should be.
Okay. And I'm going to apologize right up front here because I noticed it from the back and I caught it everywhere else. Pizzleys has an E in it as well. Okay. All right. So there you go. I catch the spelling problems right now. So before I get into my presentation though, I am going to be talking about hybrids. Before I get into my presentation though, I'm going to ask a question. I'm going to ask a question. And I'm sorry. So I don't even have my notes here, Steve. So just to let you know. So my question is were there zebras on Noah's Ark? That's my question. Okay. So before you're all ready, are you ready? You thinking about that? think biblically now, right? But before you answer, I am going to show you a picture that'll help us. Okay. So of course they're right there next to the rhinoceroses. Okay. Now I know you guys are a really sharp group, and you know that this is not a really good biblical rendition of it, is it right? You know, and everything. And I'm going to fix that. I'm going to fix that. Here we go. You ready? See, two of every kind. There was two of every kind on the ark, right? Any better? No, this is really not any better, is it? Right, Mr. Schaefer? This is where we do need to have the right type of depictions of the ark when we do this, because this is something that absolutely looks like what they say is, how could you ever fit all the animals on the ark, right? Because this is what it looks like to them. There you go. Little ring around the bathtub. But going back to were there zebras on the ark? What do you think? Were there zebras on the ark?
Yeah.
Okay, and so biblically speaking, right? I asked this question at the zoo, and when I asked the question at the zoo with our students and stuff like this that come through, and they say yes, and I say, okay, why? Why do you say that they were on the ark?
Because they're on earth.
And their answer is because they're here. And I'm just like, okay, you're thinking biblically, because what happened to everything that wasn't on the ark? And they're just like, they died. And I'm just like, that's correct. Everything that had the breath of life in it died. And since we have zebras here, therefore, they had to have an ancestor on the ark for them to be able to be here. So, but then I asked the question, and I'll ask it to you. Were there poodles on the ark?
I hope not.
Right? And I get some of the students say, like, there's this hesitation, and then some of them are just like, no, right? You know, and some of them are laughing because it's just like poodles on the ark, right? You know, and it's just like, so I'll hold on to that, right? And I'll get to that a little bit later. But thinking biblically is extremely important, and that's where we need to be. But being a Missouri, I got into this, and all of a sudden I was just like, you know what? Being a Missouri organization, why would a hybrid animal discussion be an appropriate topic? Mules. Very good. Very good. The Missouri mule, right? So, and I start looking into that, and it's just like, did you know that this was designated our state mammal in 1995? They voted on that, and they made that our state mammal. I was just like, didn't know that. So did you know this, Mr. Schaefer?
No, I'm just wondering why we need a state mammal.
I understand. But great history here with the mules in Missouri from that standpoint. Hybrid, it's a hybrid mule, female horse, male donkey. Okay. Mules bred back as far as 1000 BC. Stronger than a donkey or a horse, right? They're intelligent, not easily scared like a horse would be. And that. Now, what happens if you breed a male horse with a female donkey? It's not a mule. That's a hinny. That's called a hinny. Okay. It's still a hybrid. But anyway, so that's just another thing to think about. But indeed, these guys are intelligent and all. A horse has 64 chromosomes, and the mule has 62 chromosomes, but still able to breed and to be able to do that. And the mule then 63 chromosomes right in the middle. Okay, so that's the way that math works like that. Okay, but indeed, the hybrid mule. So why was this guy so popular? You know, because he was sure-footed, more endurance than a horse. Okay, horses wouldn't be able to make it in some of that rough terrain, but their design is ideal to navigate in that uneven area, right? And to go on, they're less likely to be injured since they're more sure-footed, right? And everything. So they thrive on limited hay and water also. So that means they're a low maintenance animal. Those are really important things if you're making long tracks and stuff like this. So pioneers would be using these guys in that way. But another interesting thing was in the 1904 World's Fair, there was a local purveyor of mules and stuff like this, and they apparently had competitions. And he entered in a team of 6 mules in his team doing, I think it was a wagon pull, and they swept the competition. And that made huge news. And so this is 1904. World War I breaks out. Great Britain calls over, and they made a contract. They wanted 350,000 Missouri mules and horses, and they had an exclusive contract with this group here in Missouri to provide them with those. That's pretty interesting. Pretty interesting background in there. So lots to be proud of as Missourians there from that standpoint. But very, very interesting. More interesting hybrids though, correct? We talked about Zonkeys. That was one of my lead-ins. Is talking about Zonkeys. So a Zonkey is a hybrid between a zebra and a donkey. Or you could have a Zorse. This is not a Photoshop. An amazing animal. So a Zorse between a zebra and a horse. So if you the way this works is when they come up with these names, so it could be just called a zebra donkey, but what they do is they take the first part of the male name, and the second part is the female name. So male zebra, female donkey get you the Zonkey. So the other way around would be a Dombra. So not as quite as catchy, but like that Z name, right? So I'll let Marv back there in the back come up with some of the names that he would use, all right? But anyway, so they get these breeds like this as well. Oh, stepping back here real quick to the mules because of this. So I think everybody familiar with the fact that mules are sterile, right? They can't have offspring. So it's not like you have mules and then you can breed more mules from them. It doesn't work. So the only way to make a mule is to have a horse and a donkey, and then you can make your mules. So, but yeah, so if you end up with a population of mules, you're in tough luck at some point, right? Because you don't have that material, that's a fertile group and everything like this. But not all hybrids are sterile like that and such. So I'll kind of get into that in a couple of these other ones. But anyway, in any just kind of stepping back here with the Zorses. So yeah, so zebras and horses able to interbreed. Now, and that's what I kind of point out at the zoo as well, is to be able to, when I point to the zebra, I says, well, we don't have any zebras around here, but it certainly looks like an animal we would have around here, right? And it looks like a horse, just with stripes on it in a way. So not so difficult to sit there and say, okay, that's interesting that these would be able to breed and make these hybrids. So let's kind of move on from there. So then, could we cross a lion with a zebra to get a tiger? Right? Is that how I'm going to get stripes on the lion and be able to get lion? I'm not going to be able to do this, right? You can't do that, right? Because biblically speaking, they are different kinds, aren't they? Right? So this would be a horse kind, and this would be a cat kind. And so you're not able to crossbreed those. But anyway, so that's not how the tiger came about. So we'll talk about that. So, but we can have lion and tiger hybrids then, because lions and tigers would be of the same cat kind, right? So, and actually, so we got that. Gary, you were at a zoo where you saw one of these, right?
Right.
Yeah. So he had a little picture of himself. It was farther away though. It was like it was like right behind him. But in any event, correct. So now, indeed, they do have these, and they're called ligers. Okay. So once again, lion, tiger, blended together to become a liger. So that's where they get their information from. And so moving on kind of from there though, that's where that comes with the father and the mother and being able to do that. Now, obviously, we don't get ligers in the wild. Ligers, because lions live in Africa and tigers live in India and Asia and Malaysia and stuff like this. So they're in some different areas there. However, there are accounts of animals like a liger, like that, back many years ago, once again, when their habitat would have been much wider and overlapping of that, right? But we don't get that today. And the story that I always tell is that, so, this lion and tiger, they got on matchup.com and, they called each other and they started going out, and next thing you know, they're having children. So you end up with the ligers. But yeah, so their ranges were very different. Interesting thing though about a liger. Okay, so lions weigh around 600 pounds, and tigers have a range up in the range of 800 pounds. Okay, so now you have a liger who ends up being off-breed of them, and the liger actually is larger than them both. The liger can be up to 1,000 pounds. Okay, so bigger than them both. Now, this is not evolution. This is not a new animal. Okay, this is just cat kind, right? It's a rearrangement of genetic material. So how do you make sense out of that? How do they all of a sudden end up getting bigger? Interesting thing is that a lion and lioness. Lions have a genetic hormone in them that is like this growth hormone. It's like a super growth hormone type of a thing. But a lioness has this inhibitor. So when they have their offspring, every one of their offspring get the growth hormone, but as well they get an inhibitor from the female and everything that keeps it in check. Now, here's the deal. The female tiger doesn't have the inhibitor. So now you've got this growth hormone that comes out and that gets passed on to a child, and there is nothing restricting it. And so that animal becomes very large then, doesn't it? So not a new thing, not a mutation, just a genetic combination that's different because of that. This guy here, his name is Hercules. Very appropriately named, huh? But as well, you can imagine though, in the wild, if you would have ligers like this would be very difficult to sneak up on a prey being that big, or to be able to run that fast after something if you're this big, or be able to jump very far like tigers and lions can, being that large. So you can imagine they would not have actually such a good survival rate from that standpoint. They would have a difficulty.
About lifespan.
I don't know about lifespan, Gary. I'll have to come back on that. So, he can, but then again, I guess he could just show up as a scavenger and basically scare off most everybody else, and he'll eat whatever somebody else catches as well, right? But in any event, so just an interesting thing as far as that goes. But again, not necessarily a evolution or a new creature, but it's just another one of the cat kind, just a different rearrangement of the genetic information. Now, of course, you might say, well, can you breed a male tiger with a lion then, right? And so there you'd get a tigon. Once again, male tiger, female lion. So you end up getting a tigon. Okay?
Now, is that a real animal?
That is a real animal. Yeah. Yeah. So they, so you'll get these different, again, and you kind of see the fact that they have this intermixing of just like we do, right, with our children. You look at a child and be able to go, that's got a little bit of me in it, it's got a little bit of mom in it, right? And in that same way, you're going to have that, you'll have that here. These hybrids, they have a mix of both the mom and the dad. Yes, sir?
According to Wikipedia, ligers typically have a life expectancy of between 13 and 18 years, though they occasionally live into their 20s. I'm glad to serve as your answer man.
So help me with how long a lion or a tiger lives compared with that. I know you do. I'm trying to keep Marv busy. It entertains all the rest of us. So that was a liger has a lifespan of, what was that, Marv? 17? 13 to 18 years. Okay. Possibly living up to 20 years in age, right? And so there we go. Yes, sir.
These are all sterile.
That's a really good question. So that's a really good question. So let me get there in just a second when I show you this, okay? So you can get a tigon by mating a tiger with a lion, exactly, and then be able to get that, all right? But it's also interesting that there's many other hybrids that we can have in this area, okay? Like a jaguar, which is a jaguar with a lioness, all right? She actually had twins, and that's what they look like. A little mixture of some of the different animals that they have, right? Or a jaguar and a lion crossbreed, right? Hybrid. Or leopard and lioness, lioness and a leopard, right? A lepon, where you end up having something like that as well, right? Yeah, Brant.
So you hear of like even lions, mountain lions in Missouri.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any examples of like exotic African cats mating with like Missouri mountain lions?
Show me. You're from the show me state. I can tell. This is that kind of crowd. I understand. Wait, hold on. I got an answer from the back of the room. Marv Schaefer.
It says, according to the internet, which is never
According to the internet, which is never wrong.
The tiger lives 15 years.
Tiger lives 15 years.
And this one is really interesting to me.
Okay.
Female lions, and we're talking about in the wild.
Female lions in the wild.
In captivity.
Yeah.
Female lions have an average lifespan of 15 to 16 years in the wild.
15 to 16
while
years.
Males live 8 to 10 years.
Males live 8 to 10 years in the wild. Boom. Anyway,
That's interesting.
That's interesting. The males don't live as long as the females, but you can imagine that if they're territorial or if they would be fighting each other and stuff like this, maybe you got that.
At the age of 10, the male starts to become weak and unable to provide for themselves.
Oh, that's different. Males become weak and are unable to provide for themselves, is what Marsh was saying. Gary, do you have something to comment? Okay, perfect. All right. Anyway, so you can see the variety that we end up getting here from these different animals and these different cat kinds. Now, right? So are they fertile? So let's just do this. A lion, and I'm sorry, I'm gonna go from memory from some standpoint, right? But a lion has 32 chromosomes. Tigers, 32 chromosomes. So a liger, hold on, it's 38. It's 38 chromosomes for the lions, 38 chromosomes for the tiger. So the half of that material comes from the father, half of it comes from the mother, and everything that coming together. And Ligers have 38 chromosomes, just like the parents. Interesting. Jaguars, 38 chromosomes. Leopards, what do you think? 38 chromosomes. They all have domestic cats, 38 chromosomes. So, would you think they'd be fertile? It seems like that would make sense. And so, Ligers, male Ligers, so they got male Ligers and female Ligers. A male Liger is actually infertile. Female Ligers have been known to be able to breed with both male lions and male tigers, and to actually have children. And so those aren't called Ligers, they're called Ligers or Ligers, right? Because it's a tiger with a liger. Anyway, so they are able to interbreed. They are able to breed and to be able to be fertile like that for them. But you can see that's interesting that it's just 32 chromosomes, and that would make sense then if they can do that, you know? So I just thought that was a cute picture there of a female, little baby tiger, liger actually, right? You know, swatting mom on the face there. That's a really nice. But hybrid, Bengal cats. So kind of along your line here, Mr. Brandt. Bengal cats. What is a Bengal cat? They bred leopards with domestic cats. Okay? They end up doing that, and it ends up being a very wild type of cat. They end up breeding more domestic cats, and everything like this. So this comes about with additional subsequent breeding with domestic cats like that. And it also generated some fertile males too. So it does, as he goes down the road, right? Involves several generations of that crossbreeding. Ultimately, a Bengal cat that they have is about just 1/8 leopard. But they got it to that point to where it was this mix of the disposition of a domestic cat and that exotic coat of a leopard like that. And that's what they wanted. So they bred it to kind of get there. Now you have a female Bengal cat and a male Bengal cat that are fertile. Now you can have Bengal cats from them, right? So there we go. We end up having that, and they can be fertile like that. But I thought that was interesting. Again, this interbreeding and them working with that to capture that type of a look really is what they were kind of looking for. Savannah cat, very kind of similar, where they were breeding serval cats with domestic cats and doing that, and then breeding other domestic cats. And they were saying it made them less wild. So once again, there's that, we think about maybe these animals getting features from their mother and dad are physical features. And yet what you're finding is that not just physical, okay, is that there's this disposition as well. You had that as well with the mules, right? Is where the mule being bred with the horses and the donkeys being inbred together, you're getting certain strength features from the mom and certain, or whatever from the dad and being different from that standpoint. But indeed, so they were doing this and end up making them less wild, okay? But involved several generations of crossbreeding with this. They were highly intelligent though, and they could play fetch. They found them to be able to play fetch even better than a dog. If you could believe that, man's best friend, come on. Anyway, but they would say that, is that they do that. But they were very intelligent, so much so that they were easily getting into kitchen cabinets and stuff like this. And so they put child locks on the kitchen cabinets, and they got into those still. So that tells you how smart they are from that standpoint. But the interesting thing was, so this is like the first generation serval cat with a domestic cat. And then as they would breed domestic cats in with them and everything, this the second generation, third generation, fourth generation. So they're getting smaller, you can see. But that first generation was a larger cat. They had some pictures online, whatever, showing these larger Savannah cats. I was just like, that would be interesting. And I'm not a cat person necessarily, but that was kind of an interesting thing on that, as opposed to a house cat. So this is talking about house cat, normal house cat weighing about 9 pounds, being 9.5 inches. That first round there of a servile cat there, Savannah cat, was 23 pounds, and what is it showing? 16 inches tall. So it's almost twice as big as the domestic cat from that standpoint. So again, these things can do this and end up being different sizes and get those different features that they get from their mothers and fathers. But 38 chromosomes. Let's don't leave the dogs out. Mr. Grimes, you did a great job there on the dogs. If you haven't seen that, that was on our calendar last year that we had. He did this in December, so you can even go back in our events calendar actually, and go back to December 1st last year, and there's a link there to his talk on dogs. But lots of variation within the dog kind that you even see here that we have here. And then of course you've got things. Then of course you have things like the golden doodle, that's very popular. Cockapoo. That you might have, right? That you have, or a Labradoodle that you have. So Labrador and a poodle, you're breeding those dogs together and making new dogs, new breeds. But right, Steve. So but scientifically, they've looked at the dog kind that they have here, and they looked at domestic dogs, and they found that it came from a very small population. They were tracing things back genetically. And in fact, that genetic population that they were tracing things back to, they traced back dingoes and wolves and coyotes and foxes, all kind of coming back to this original kind. So from a creation standpoint and everything like this, we would look at that and we would say, this is the dog kind, right? And within that dog kind, you can have these different animals because they're all according to their kinds. And you're not going to get outside of those boundaries from that standpoint. Anything else on that, Steve, real quick? Good. Interesting though is that, so from that standpoint, right? This is a fox dog. So I don't even, fog, right? Exactly, right. So, but it was where this female dog, domestic dog, was found to be pregnant, and she had a child, a baby litter in that, and they were just noticing that it was different. And they did a genetic DNA test on it and came to find out that it actually, there was a male fox must apparently been in the area and bred with the female and end up having that. But you'll have wolf dogs, we have coy dogs, coyotes, and dogs interbreeding and things like that. So again, there's these quote hybrids, but they're all of the same kind. These aren't new kinds of animals. They're still of the domestic, of the dog type, and everything is from that standpoint. Hybrids in the bear kind too. How about that? Pizzly bear, yeah, that's what we were talking about. Polar bear with a grizzly bear to get you the Pizzly bear. Okay. Once again, the dad with the mom to get you Pizzly bear. And so she actually had two offspring. But that's where you'll end up getting this mix of features from that standpoint. You see them not as dark as the grizzly bear, lighter, because they're getting different features from the father from that standpoint. So actually the first one of these in the wild was found in 2006. There was a hunter who actually shot a bear, shot a bear like this, and there was actually a law against shooting grizzly bears, and so they were just like, you can't be shooting grizzly bears, and it was just like, well, is it a grizzly bear? And they did a DNA test on it and found out that it was half polar bear, and so they said, oh, I guess you're off the hook. but that was the first case that they had in the wild. And actually, I take that back. That's going to end up being a growler bear, because the dad was actually a grizzly and the mom was a polar bear in that particular case, because they did find 7 other in the wild in that area. They found 7 other bears that had that mix, and then they did an interesting thing. They did a check on the mitochondrial DNA on the animals as well. And so if you understand, so mitochondria is a very interesting kind of thing within your cells, but the DNA you get in there is strictly from your mother's side. So it's the maternal side of things. So they actually did DNA testing on the mitochondria, and they found out that all the mitochondria DNA matched, which basically said it was one female polar bear that all these growler bears came from. And so there's that mix there of these grizzlies and one female polar bear being in the area having these offspring. So that was DNA is kind of an interesting thing, whatever, when they're digging into it, to be able to trace some of these things back, and everything like that, some of your CSI kind of things, right? But Pizzley bears, physical traits, generally intermediate between the polar bear and the grizzly bear. So kind of interesting, right? Their bodies are smaller than the polar bear, but they're larger than the grizzly bears. They got the long neck like a polar bear, but these short, small shoulders like humps, like a grizzly. And then their soles of their feet are, see, a polar bear feet are all covered with hair. They hair covered on their feet, and that's an insulation thing, is that they were saying. But grizzly bears don't have that. But what they found with the Pizzleys is that their feet were partially covered in hair. So kind of an interesting mix of a feature there. Yes, Paul?
Scott, where were those some Pizzleys found? Do you know what area?
Do I know what area? It wasn't in the St. Louis area, Paul. It's okay. I think I believe it was up in Canada. I can't remember the specific area, but I believe it was up in Canada. And this is something that they're talking about, is that they're talking about that depending upon which way it goes and everything like this, they would say, hey, is this an instance of climate change where things are getting warmer? And if things would get warmer, then would grizzly bears start going up into the territories where there are polar bears, and or vice versa? If it gets colder and everything, that would polar bears actually wander down into an area where there's grizzly bears, and things like that. But in any event, so kind of interesting. But they cross paths. They have to cross paths. Otherwise, those other ones that I had pictures of, those were actually from a zoo, where they had them in the same area, and all. I think everybody kind of probably understands the whole idea of polar bears. Their hair is hollow from that standpoint. Steve does a great job at the zoo talking about, if you haven't been to one of our zoo tours, shame on you. You need to come to one of our zoo tours. It's not just for homeschoolers. You can come out and do that. And we've had grown adults come, and they have a great time. Learn a lot of things, don't they? We all learn a lot of things. But anyway, Steve does a great job on the polar bears. And yeah, so their hair is hollow, and that is a great insulating type of feature for the polar bears, from that standpoint. In fact, so much so that I saw something earlier that said they were trying to detect, they wanted to do a count of polar bears, and they flew overhead with an infrared camera to be able to pick them up in the snow, thinking, hey, I'll pick up the heat against the snow and everything like this, only to find out that they could not find polar bears with the camera. And from an infrared standpoint, they are so well insulated that they cannot see them with, it's very difficult to see them with an infrared camera even. So they went back and they were, I think, able to use ultraviolet and were able to probably do that count better. But that was something that was interesting, but very well insulated from that standpoint. And all. So much so that as well, they say when one of these guys are running, if they're running in the chase and stuff like this, they can even overheat because they're generating so much energy and everything. They're so well insulated and holding all the heat in that they can get to that. Yes, Steve. Yeah.
I was only gonna quick that they're not using the James Webb telescope to do that infrared search. It can detect the heat of a bumblebee at the distance of the moon. 1,000 miles away. Yeah, we don't have too many of those lying around.
Steve, I would have them to go back and recalibrate because there are no bumblebees on the moon, okay? But in any event, so polar bears then have got a mix of their hair, okay? Mix of their hair as it is. Now, the interesting thing is that partial covered hair on their feet. That's, so grizzly bears, their hair is solid. Their hair is solid. So the feet on the Pizzley bear, their feet were solid hair. The hair was solid on there. But the brown patches that they had up around in here, which you would think, well, that's brown, that's got to be from the grizzly, and they were hollowish. They had hollow spots in them as well. So they're picking up those things. But you could as well see where a grizzly bear with hollow insulating thing, that would be really bad for a bear in a more warmer climate. They would be very overheating from that standpoint. So not just in the bear kind, but in the cattle kind as well. All right. God made, isn't it interesting when you read through Genesis and you come across that and he says, and he created them by their kinds, the cattle kind is one of them and everything like this. So you think about these different cattle that he's bred. And so that would turn into being something like this. And so this is a beefalo. So a inbreed, if you might be familiar with these guys, but not just a buffalo, but buffaloes breeding with actually cattle, cows and that. So to be able to do that and end up having a cross between them. And what they find is that the buffalo has a very has a very lean meat to it. In fact, almost too lean and such. And the cows has a much fattier meat to it. And so this crossbreed ends up giving it the flavor and everything like this of a bison, but actually ends up having a little bit more of that fat in it that ends up making it better for cooking and things like this, and gives it a little bit more of that flavor. So not that that's why the beef and, bison and cattle would do it for that reason, right? I'll taste better to people. That's why I want to do this. But yeah, but kind of interesting. So out in Wright City, another one of our zoo tours back in the days of COVID, we did Big Joel's Safari out there. If you haven't been out there, that's an interesting place to do because they have all these different things. And they actually have bison and they actually have longhorn cattle and some other cattle and everything like this. And they had an instance where one of their bison actually did get into the cattle area and everything like this. And next thing you know, they had a pregnant cattle and had the hybrid crossbreed between them. So that was kind of an interesting thing. But those are some of the features that you might see. You might see there. I'm gonna have to. Hybrids in the sea. So not just on the land, we got them in the sea as well. So this is where in Sea Park in Hawaii, they had a false killer whale with a bottlenose dolphin in the same area and everything like this. Now, granted, bottlenose dolphin, 6 feet long, 600 pounds. False killer whale, 20 feet long. Okay, 2,000 pounds. But the female dolphin was found pregnant and indeed had a baby, and they found it to be that the false killer whale was the father. It came out and it looks, you see it kind of has some features of a dolphin, but it's got this darker color of the false killer whale and everything like this. So Oh, there we go. 4,000 pounds. So there's their mix. And so once again, not a whale, not a dolphin, but a wholphin mixture that they have there. So dolphins have 88 teeth in their mouth. The false killer whale has 44 teeth in his mouth, and the wholphin has 66 teeth in his mouth, right in the middle. So you have 88, 44, and right in the middle, you end up having 66 for the wholphin. So kind of interesting features from that standpoint. And once again, these have been found to be fertile as well. The wholphin bred with male bottlenose dolphins and had offspring with them. And in fact, that's the last, at least in captivity there. They've got the one that's 20 years old there now, which was a child of the original hybrid that was out there. But all those offspring, needless to say, now were a mix of whales and dolphins, but they were about 3/4 dolphin and only about a quarter wholphin, a quarter whale, I'm sorry, in that. So yeah, so you end up getting these different mixtures of them and everything like this. This was another thing where they ended up having a research crew was out looking at some fish and stuff like this, and looked at this pod of dolphins that was going by and noticed this different animal that was in with it and everything. They ended up getting a DNA sample of it. They were just like, it's kind of strange looking, and they found it to be a hybrid, that it was actually a female melon-head shark, or melon-headed whale. You're going to come up with this melon-headed whale swimming with a school of rough-toothed dolphins, is what they said, and all. But they said it's the first time they've ever, much less in the wild, but it's the first time they've ever known a cross between those two species there. But again, we're seeing all these different things as far as other hybrids in the seas. Oh, this was another one. This is where this fisherman was hunting and he found this animal, and it looked very different, but he ended up catching it and took it home. But it was a big animal, and he ended up keeping the head and had the skull of it up on his shed. And a marine biologist came through one time and was just like, "What is that?" And he explained to him what it was, and he goes, "Can I take that?" And he told him who he was, and he was just like, "I'd like to know what this is." And the guy said the same thing, and so he said he took it away. And they did some DNA samples on it, and they got some poor DNA samples, but it was enough to be able to do this. But they found it he said it looks a lot like a beluga whale in the head, but it doesn't have the same teeth. It has these really strange looking teeth to it and everything. They did the DNA test on it and found out that it actually, the father was a narwhal. If you're familiar with narwhals, this narwhal has a single tooth, and that single tooth, it looks like a tusk coming out of him. So he's known as the unicorn of the sea, if you've had that. But in any event, it's got a spiral type of a look to it, and these teeth here had spirals to it as well, and everything like this. So narwhal, dad, beluga, whale. Actually, what would you end up having a name there? The Narluga. Okay. So that was what they had there. They named this half breed. But again, you get these whales that are crossbreeding that are just like, how is this? And again, this mixture of features that you're getting. But I think all of this is that I've kind of walked through is this idea that animals reproduce according to their kinds, just like it says in Genesis, right? In Genesis chapter 1, it says it 10 different times that here that, he made these animals according to their kinds. According to their kinds, he made them. And it is interesting that, that this would point to the fact that it doesn't cross out of that boundary. That's why, Ray Comfort, he'll go around to some scientists and everything. He goes, Give me an example of one kind turning into another kind. And he's looking for this cross, and they all talk about, well, of course, we've got these fish. And it's just like, well, what are they now? Well, they're fish. It's just like, well, that's not a change of kind, right? You know? And he starts talking about changes of kinds, and they're just like, well, that's not possible. And he goes, exactly. You know? So, but this is what we're talking about, right? Is that you have a horse kind, you have a cat kind, you've got the dog kind, bear kinds. So from that standpoint, and then from the standpoint of the, it's also interesting to read through Genesis chapters 6 and 7, where you have the flood account, because there again, God says to Noah that he's going to send him these animals, and these animals are going to come, and then they're going to repopulate it according to their kinds. And I'm going to send you 2 of every kind of animal, right? So it's not 2 of every species, because that's where it blows out of proportion. That's where it blows out to where the atheists and those skeptics sit there and say, how can you fit all of these animals on the ark? Because look how many species there are, and you have to have all these different animals on the ark. Well, first off, how big is the ark, right? And it's understanding how large the ark is a big help. But and I'll step back into that. But animals reproduce according to their kinds. So, not outside of that. Marv, this is for you, okay? So you're not going to produce dogs, breed dogs with birds and get bird dogs, okay? I like that. You're not going to do this. This is not how you get a bird dog. This is not a bird dog either, is it? Great Photoshops, though. Nor am I going to end up breeding cats with fish to get a catfish. Okay? That's not a catfish. This is not how you, right? You can't do this because they're different kinds. They're different kinds. Okay? So that's going to be beyond what it can do, right? And so there's no catmilans. Let me see. Chameleons, not chameleons, so catmilans. Right? Or bird boons, the baboon with the birds. Or this would be, Marv, come on, you should get one of these guys, the tiger-raph. Okay? A tiger with a giraffe. Right? That would be pretty cool. But we don't see those, do we? And that would then point back to as well this idea that, well, God says it's according to their kinds. So he's kind of limited that ability for these animals to be able to crossbreed like that and to be able to go, interesting. So we should be able to look at the world and be able to find kinds of animals that can't breed with other kinds and be able to do that. And in fact, I've been talking all about these things, and we call them hybrids because they're different. You know, they're just like, oh yeah, there's these different. But I would actually call this would actually be more the hybrid, right? Because in my mind, hybrids are 2 different kinds that you're really putting together, like a hybrid car. It's not electric. It's not combustion. It is something in the middle. It's something that's got part of both of those, right? And everything. So in that same way, because all those other animals that I talked to you guys about, they're really just part of the same kind, right? They're all just part of the horse kind, part of the cat kind. Everything. So this is where then I kind of asked to turn on the gears here from a biblical standpoint of what this really means, because this is when you really start thinking your way through that. Because like I said, the size of the ark. Well, let me just see what else I have here. That's what I thought. When I was doing my research and everything like this, sometimes you might have this happen, right? It's in the middle of this. All of a sudden, some different websites start popping up, some different things start popping up and saying, hey, here's something, whatever. And so this thing came up and it was just like, so what kind of animals were on the ark? It was just like, well, that's kind of an interesting thing. Why would that pop up right now? Anyway, but so I was kind of looking at it and I was talking about the ark and stuff like this. But interesting thing was back in 1675, there was this Jesuit priest and he was trying to take the biblical account and try to make sense out of the biological information that we had and trying to do that, because there was people who were skeptical about this being a true account, right? And how can we get all these animals on there and everything? So he kind of went to an extreme though, on one hand, because he started saying things to kind of limit this down and everything. He had it to where it was like you could get by with maybe having 50 mammals, 30 bird types, and then he had some other reptiles as well in there. But to get like something like a giraffe, he went to a hybrid state where I was just talking that it can't happen, where he was saying, oh, so giraffes are really kind of like a camel made it with a jaguar to get the camel, which can't happen. But it was because he was trying to squeeze down the number of kinds that he had and thinking that he had to do that to fit them all on the ark and all. But that same article, I found it very interesting that they had a lot of artwork about the different arks represented, and most of them looked like bathtubs. Yes, Gary, that they did. These were about probably the closest ones that I had of what a biblical ark would have kind of looked like. But this guy here is even half the size of what the real ark would have been like. It's much longer than that. But anyway, but I found it interesting that they were even back then trying to find ways to be able to do this. But they said by the 17th century, man had explored enough and had traveled enough to find so many different species that by the 17th century, they said it's impossible to fit all the animals onto one boat. And so they said it was a myth. And that's when they really kind of started dismissing what the Bible said from that standpoint. Yeah, really quick.
So there were 7 clean animals. What was the reason for that? Right.
Yeah. So those would have been right. Correct. So 2 of every kind. However, there were 7 of the clean animals. Very good. Very good. And so 7 of the clean animals. Correct. And so that would have been more of for sacrifices as such. And then as well, to kind of repopulate the earth, right? Is that if you're going to be sacrificing a lot of those and stuff like this and sacrificing them there, then you have to be careful about how many you really have on board. Yeah. So that's good. But yeah, so if nothing else, I'm kind of trying to point to the fact that, again, animals reproduce after their kinds. And so when we look at this, right, is that Noah does not have to bring horses and donkeys and zebras, all on the ark. He needs a horse kind. He doesn't need all the different dingoes and coyotes and wolves and stuff like this. He needs a dog kind. So 2 ways to be able to make, if you're having doubts about the ark and the account of the Bible that's there, number 1 is to understand how huge the ark was, right? But even then, if you start thinking about all the different animal kinds, you're just like, how could you do this? The more I studied this, though, it was just like, oh my goodness, this makes the ark space so huge, really, right? Because the number of animals I have to have is so small. All right. Ultimately, it was about 1,500. I think the calculations were right about 1,500 kinds. Somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000, right? Because you don't need to have fish on board. Okay, you're not bringing on insects. However, they survived, didn't they? Right. But so there's certain animals that you didn't have to do. So it was everything that had breath of life in its lungs, right? That were saved, and so they were the ones that were brought on board. And so that's where you end up having that. And so then maybe 1,500, maybe 2,000. Maybe 2,000 animals or whatever it is, or 2,000 species rather on there, or kinds rather. And then you end up having 2 of each kind, obviously, and 7 of some, as you said. So, you end up with 4,000 something animals on side of on the ark with them. And all, and it makes it very much, the size of the ark, once again, becomes very large when I think about it from that perspective. It's not crowded with all these animals necessarily, pushing up against each other because there's not enough room. It's a very spacious kind of a thing from that standpoint. Did you have something else, Steve? Did you have a question? No? Good.
Well, look at the people on the globe from 8 people
True.
and the different makeups.
You've got the different genetic makeup that you have you have of that and everything. So I'm going to throw something else out there from that standpoint because and I'm going to end up having to take another talk on this, I think, Marv, whatever, as I was kind of going through this. But you guys familiar with what's called a bottleneck event, a genetic bottleneck event? Okay. Bottleneck is a point in time in which things would narrow down and a very few species are able to survive. It's an environmental type of a thing. It'd be kind of like if you would have some type of global catastrophe, like an ice age, you know, or something like that, that would kill off a lot of things, but only certain species are able to kind of get through and everything like this. And then on the other side, then just like I said at the zoo, there's going to be animals that come out the other side that have to be related to those who made it through that bottleneck from that standpoint. And so if you have a tight bottleneck like this, to where you've got all this genetic information and variation that you have on this side and everything like this, but only red, blue, and yellow come through the bottleneck event, what do you end up having? Red, blue, and yellow. Because that's all that made it through. That's all the information that made it through. Whereas if you have a wider bottleneck, right, not and more features kind of come through, now you'll have more diversity here. You'll have more diversity here because more species came through and more animal types came through that end up having that that founding population has more genetic variation. So this is where I could go a couple different ways. But you think about the arc, talk about a bottleneck. Talk about a bottleneck. You're taking dogs, the dog kind, down to 2. And that's where some of the scoffers are saying, how in the world would you ever get the number of animals that we have now if you end up doing that? Because they're only going to have what's in the genetic. And so they're used to bottleneck events like what would happen here, which is a natural random type of a thing, to where if the population's in this area and they're the only ones who survive and everything else dies off, that's all the features you get. So from that standpoint, if Noah brings Dalmatian dogs on the ark with him, if there were Dalmatian dogs at the time, and he brings them onto the ark with him, all we're going to have is Dalmatian dogs, right? Or some variation of Dalmatians. You are going to be very easy to see that that's all you have, right? And so that's where they start scoffing at it, to be able to say, how could you ever get to what we have today? All right. And so this is where I'll do a Dennis Genovese thing with us here, okay? Because of what he was talking about with light. So if I have a prism here, right, and this is prism coming through, and you get all these different colors of light and everything like this. So you get that if you had red light just only came through and hit the prism, you're only going to get red light. Your blue light come through and hits that prism, it's only going to give you blue light. But if you had white light is what came through, it's got the greatest variation. And you'd get all the colors again, wouldn't you? It's very interesting to me that God did not tell Noah, go pick out 2 of every kind. You read that. He doesn't do that. He tells them, I will send, the animals will come to you. I'm going to send you animals. So God would send animals with the genetic variation that we would need to get all the kinds that we get. See, and that's the thing, is where we would have done it, right? I can imagine it, just thinking about it, is that, Noah might have said, well, I really like those zebras, let's bring those zebras on board, right? And that would have really limited us, right? And so God didn't tell him to go do that. He's just like, I'm sending them to you. From Noah's perspective, I think that the animals that came aboard would have had a mixture of all these different animals. They wouldn't have looked like zebras. They wouldn't have looked like horses. They wouldn't have looked like mule. They would have had this, and like the tigers even, it would have been a different thing. Or the dogs even, and be able to go, I could think of me as Noah and just going, you know, that's not the animal pair I would have picked. Right? It's just like, what is that? That's like a mongrel, you know, type of a thing. It's just like, exactly. Right? So you want that, and God would have that to come through. So when they sit there and they scoff at it and be able to say, wait a minute, you're only going to have red, blue, and yellow. How are you going to get all the, no, the one that comes through that God sent was two with all the same genetic information that you had back here. Do you lose a bunch of information? You do. But what comes through, he sends through the ones with the right genetic information. Steve, did you have something?
Just a thought. And if you haven't come across this, it's an undeveloped thought, conjecture. But prior to the flood, the young Earth position isn't holding the canopy theory anymore. But I think it is pretty well accepted that the Earth was much more uniform in temperature and in climate. And so a lot of the genetic diversity we see is resulting from environmental pressures. So,
True.
It is possible that, you know, the dogs, and we've gotten all these dog kinds because of artificial.
Correct. Artificial selection, right.
But without all of the atmospheric and environmental diversity, there may not have been as much diversity yet. Potential was still there. The variation potential was still in the genome of the vast number of dog kinds. And the
Correct.
vast number of horse kinds, because they hadn't had the need to express these different potentials.
Mhm.
So yes, God picked them, but they may have not surprised Noah because, yeah, that's the things I've been seeing, because that's they all get like.
Yeah, maybe they all have that same genetic makeup, right? But in a way, right? I mean, they shouldn't, right? You know, out of you know, it's the same thing as if you have a middle brown mom and a middle brown dad and everything. This and all, they can have a child that's all white. They can have a child that's all black, right? We would say, right? The high melanin and low melanin, as we would say, or anywhere kind of in between, right? And everything. So
mutation load was much lower at that point in the
True.
history of the world.
True, mutations would be much lower from that standpoint. Just, real quick, Marv first, and then Brant.
It's not what you're talking about as well. Mongrel dogs that have like a little bit of everything are the hardiest dogs you can have.
Yeah.
The pure breeds are sick all the time.
Lots of different problems with
They're
them, right?
kiddish and
Lots of different problems with the purebreds, right?
It's the ones that are the old Heinz 57.
Mongrels, right? Yep.
Those are the ones.
Those
that
are really healthy.
Healthiest and the hardiest.
Hardiest, right? Able to do it. That might also go back to the idea of the mule being, you know, a more hardy animal too, right? Anyway, Brant, did you have something real quick?
I went to the Ark.
Wow, you were there.
And, not the Ark. So in Kentucky, I was there, and you know, I'm sure that half of this room has been there too. And of course, it's worth mentioning again that there might have just been little baby animals that went on the Ark, and that easily can fill up the Ark. Now, I want to ask you a question.
Yeah. So the comment, just real quick, so for folks online, so the comment was you could have also had very young animals getting on board also. That would not take up so much space. So from a space standpoint, you've got that, and I agree with you, Brant. I think you. Yeah.
I came up, I'm just speculating. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Let me ask you a question that I'm gonna take you where I'm thinking, but and you may shoot this down like this is just not on the text.
Go.
But I tend to think.
Okay.
The Ark was not a dark place. I tend to think that the Shekinah glory of God lit the place up like a beautiful garden.
Okay.
And just like the most holy place,
Mm-hmm.
the priest and sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
And I've also heard that, you know, it suggested that the Ark was kind of a recreation of Eden. And so Eden would have light, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm speculating that the Shekinah glory of God lit it like a beautiful day. Though.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if that is true, okay, you can shoot that down if it's, you know, I know it's not in the text. But I think there'd be enough room to bring trees on. Like fruit bearing trees for the animals to eat.
Right,
It's also been speculated that they hibernate, but
right.
I'm saying, no, I think it was like the garden. They were
Mhm.
running around and, you know, that's the way I envision it. And I know it's not in the text.
Yeah.
About vegetable life, but you know, the trees didn't walk to the ark, but it's a thought that, you know, not everything is in scripture, not all the details.
I understand, but he does say what he sent to them, right? He did tell them to collect the food for them and everything this, and then he does say he's sending those animals that had the breath of life with it. And he's very specific. Multiple times he mentions everything outside of the ark that had the breath of life in it died. He didn't talk about, yeah, you're right. He didn't talk about, you know, trees making their way on the ark, nor does it say anything about them bringing necessary trees on the ark. But I'll say that that ultimately the dove that he sent out that came back with the olive tree, that wasn't on the ark. So there was obviously plant life can survive that, and seeds can survive that type of stuff as well. Yeah, just real quick.
I was gonna say the food that he put on there for them animals, if it had the grain head in it, it had to die and sprout, and they could have done that after. You know, that.
Correct.
You could keep all them variations.
Correct. You take all the plant life, you take all the different seed.
The crops you put on there for seed.
Yep. Absolutely.
That'll live through manure.
Yep. That'll live through, seeds will live through manure. They will. And they will sprout through manure as well, right? So that may have been a totally different thing. But I guess the last thing, let me kind of close with this, because this was something that had been impressed on me as well this week, and everything. So we talk about this bottleneck event, and we talk about on the ark. What a bottleneck event that would be, wouldn't it? Right? But not everything, not all the animals of the earth were on the ark, right? So think about some of the things that weren't on the ark.
They're finding the bones now.
So, well, what? No, but you got sharks, you got fish, right? You didn't have fish on the ark. So you think about that. I know fish were impacted by the flood, and fish were impacted. They were buried. We're finding them buried and stuff like this as well, right? You know, that you have. But the thing that gets me is that the genetic variation that you have coming through, if you just have a pair, and that from that pair you end up coming out from the genetic variation, that's all the species that you're going to have is from the genetic variation you have in there. As opposed to if you would have had the genetic information that more comes through, right? So the question is what types of animals would have more actually survive the flood than what was on the ark? Okay. So let me just pass this through you, is that one of the things I thought about was insects from that standpoint. Insects can live through a lot of things. And I just read in a CMI publication, they were talking about, you know, people scoff at the number of species that we have. And they said, there's like 2 million species. And he says, you know, half of those are insects. And I'm just like, well, wouldn't that make sense from a standpoint of if they don't go through that bottleneck event that you have where you went all the way down to 2 and then repopulate? You didn't have that. They would have plenty of genetic information that would all pass through the flood event and would end up with having a whole bunch of species by the time it got to us. So, and fish are the same way. Fish have got a lot more species than land animals. And so I look at those two things and say, isn't that kind of interesting? Because from a biblical standpoint, that is what I would expect, that the animals that were on the ark that were just down to 2 would have fewer species than things that went through the flood without perishing. So I'll leave you kind of with that thought, and I will probably come back to that at some point. But thank you guys very much. Yeah, Beverly, just real quick. It was a very interesting, I appreciate the time.
Well, he left one out.
No.
A male hare and a female rabbit, you get a habit. And there are good ones and bad ones. And amazingly, the females can recognize the bad habits. That.
Boom, boom.
Right?
Oh, yeah. Okay. All right, Beverly. Yes, ma'am.
When a hybrid was born, would either the mother or the father know it's different and reject it?
Oh, would the mothers reject the offspring if
Does it look like her that's the-
I would say from what I've seen, whatever, I haven't heard of that, and everything this, and I think I would have a difficult time of a mother of any kind of mother animal really rejecting its offspring. It is something that is half of you, right? And that, and so, but yeah, so regardless, and I understand what you're saying. So, and regardless, again, I think you go back to the point of we look at it and we go, wow, that's different. And they're looking at it and going, it's another cat, right? Or another dog, right? Yeah, it looks different, but it's still a dog kind. So,
and it came from me?
yeah, and it came from me. Yeah, but that's good. That was good. Thanks for all your questions. That was entertaining for when I had that.
Any other questions for Scott before we close?
Anything online? Did anybody text you with any messages? Marv was supposed to oh my goodness, here we go.
Other
Anyway.
branch business. Thank you,
Yep.
Steve.
What's that? What about what?
Some animals produce a whole lot more than just a single
Yes. Yes. That's really, yeah.
So how many of those eggs in this female?
Yeah, you'll have litters in your offspring. Exactly, right? They're not just having one. So yeah, if you're saying within a first generation, right? And if you go and say, fine, it's going to get the genetic information from their mother and the father, and they've got that genetic disposition, have all this different information, that indeed it could have a litter of 8 dogs, and every one of them look different. Right? That's very possible. That's very possible from that standpoint. Anyway,
Right.
okay,
I got the text.
perfect.
All right. So before we adjourn, I'm gonna have Scott pray.
Yeah, thank you.
And then we have books for sale in the back, and there are some free items back there as well, brochures about a variety of topics. So please visit us in the back. And remember that next month, Gary will be presenting. And Gary, do you want to say anything about it?
Well, the topic may alter a little. It'll be something along that line with different people groups.
Different people groups who have similar, in a lot of ways, creation accounts to what the Bible has.
Yeah.
Great. Okay.
No, that's good.
All right. Pray us out, big boy.
Okay. Perfect. Heavenly Father, we come to you and we marvel at you, Father. We marvel at your wisdom and your creativity in your creation of everything that we have. And we're astounded by that. We thank you, Lord, for this scientific information that we look through, that we can look at your word and make sense from what we see. And it aligns with what you tell us, that you've made things according to their kinds, that your word is trustworthy. And for us to indeed take this and continue to study this, that science does align with what your word says. As we look at the insects that didn't go through the ark, and how many different variations we have of those, that would make sense that they would be so popular, so many different varieties of them. So we praise you and we thank you, Lord, for revealing these things to us. And Lord God, just like I said, is that your word is trustworthy. May we hold fast to it and help us to obey. Help us to walk in a manner worthy of being called by your name. So we thank you, Lord, for that. I pray your blessing be upon us and help us as we go forth as well to others, to be able to share the good news of the gospel, to be able to make sense of these things. And we just thank you, Lord, for our time together. Bless us on our way home. and bless us in our week. We pray these things in the name of your Son, our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Scott.
Sure.
There you go, bro.
That mine?
No, no. Back on the.
Oh, well.